either live by the gun or you die by the sword.
Welcome in, dear listeners, to the classroom of the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast. I'm Nicho.
And I'm Chris.
And today we are sitting down for the most accurate of historical lessons ever known to man.
So accurate.
We're doing History of the World Part 1.
Yes, we are.
Yeah, this one is one that I've heard about for a very long time.
Yes. So, Mel Brooks, arguably one of my favorite writer, director, sometimes actor. He has a lot of things under his belt, but he has a couple that stand out, especially because they're usually the ones that he writes, directs, and stars in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of the big ones. However, A, not his best. B, maybe not his biggest. But it sticks in people's minds because it is a unique idea.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's an anthology series about kind of the precursor or the prehistory history up until the French Revolution.
And arguably, it is just the parts that Mel Brooks thought he could make funny.
Yeah.
Because it jumps around, it's in order, but it jumps kind of seemingly randomly.
In order is a loose term towards the end, I'd say.
It really is. And granted, part of the jumping around heavily is part because he never planned on a part 2.
Mm-hmm.
I know there is now a part 2 available.
And it's a TV show as well.
It is, but originally the running joke of the movie was that there was no part 2, and thus he kind of had free reign to pick whenever he wanted.
Yeah, I think it was a play on some history book.
It was a play on a history book. I'm glad you found that little tidbit. I managed to find a couple of interviews with Mel Brooks talking about this, and also with cast and crew, talking about their time in general working with Mel Brooks, because, again, a lot of these people have worked a lot with Mel Brooks. He has a lot of recurring actors who come and, show up on his movies. And the fancy version of the story, probably the more realistic one if we're honest, is that the movie is based off of the book, The History of the World, by Sir Walter Raleigh. He was going to have this be a multi-series where he was going to document the entire history of the entire world. However, there was never a second volume published because he was arrested and executed in 1618.
Ah.
So thus the joke of there was never a part 2.
Okay, that's why it kind of leaves off roughly where it does.
Yeah. Also, there is a behind the stage rumor that Mel Brooks himself started that he likes to say when asked about how he came up with this idea. This movie came after Young Frankenstein, and while walking the halls of the publication area and the studio, someone called out to him and said, what are you working on next, Mel Brooks? Something big? And he said, of course, I'm going to work on the history of the world. And they said, wow, that's a lot. You think that's going to fit in a whole movie? He goes, no, it'll have to be in parts.
Kind of played off the Spaceballs a little bit, which I think Spaceballs came out after this, right?
It did. As far as the big ones, granted, he acted a bunch between these. There's a couple of extra writing credits in between that I don't qualify as, the big ones, but this comes after Young Frankenstein, right before Spaceballs.
Yeah, and speaking of the writing credits, it's written and directed by Mel Brooks.
Sure is.
Starring Mel Brooks as Moses.
Yes.
Mel Brooks as Comicus.
Yeah.
Mel Brooks as Torquemada.
Mm-hmm.
Mel Brooks as Jax.
Yep.
And Mel Brooks as King Louis VI, or 16.
The 16th.
XVI.
Also, Mel Brooks as Piss Boy.
Yes. Yeah, as well as Gregory Hines as Josephus.
Yeah.
And Dom DeLuise as Emperor Nero.
And that's just the top credits. This movie is star-studded. By this point, again, he had been writing and directing and starring for a very, very long time and had a long accolade of people who were happy to just show up in his movie for a single line or a quick jab. And this movie's packed with it, which, for a Mel Brooks fan, for this group, that's part of what makes this movie fun, is there's so many cameos. There's so many one-piece actors who you recognize from his other productions that you're like, oh, this character's back again. Or he was very well known for taking in stand-up comedians of the time. I love old stand-up comedy. I think it's so interesting to see. So there's a lot of stand-up comedians who either kept coming back in his movies, or a few of them, such as Gregory Hines, this is their debut role.
Okay. Yeah, see, I don't really know whole lot about Mel Brooks. I kind of got into him later in my life.
Which doesn't surprise me. He's not normally your type of humor.
Well, that's the thing is, like, my dad grew up, like, when I grew up, my dad talked about Blazing Saddles as one of the funniest movies of all time.
It is, and I still hold that standard.
Well, I didn't watch it until college, even though he owned it, and I don't know why we didn't watch it.
But also, college is the age to enjoy Mel Brooks, and that just kind of really is overly emphasized in this movie. College age is the target audience for History of the World Part 1. Yeah,
and I can kind of see that. Going into this one was a little bit different for me because, again, all I know from Mel Brooks really is History of the World Part 1, Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, and Spaceballs, I think, is really all I know of him for.
Men in Tights is by far my favorite, but that's a personal pick of mine.
Yeah, you talked about that one so much that I did end up watching it a couple of years ago finally, but yeah. It was just one of those ones where, like, he's one of those directors where you hear so much about everything he does that it's just like, okay, I know his name. I don't necessarily want to see his stuff at some point, you know, where it's a little it feels like it's going to be overhyped, maybe.
And I honestly think this is one of the ones that falls victim to that.
Yeah.
This movie, to me, a little overhyped. Do I like it? Of course I like it. But it's not his best. This isn't where I would start someone on their Mel Brooks journey.
Yeah, well, before we get into your displeasure for this movie, what are we drinking today, Chris?
You have managed to find a beer called Philosopher King, which really just encompasses this movie.
Yep, for the stand-up philosopher.
And also king.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers. Yep, very leaf.
Pine tar.
Yeah, just a little tree licking. Boy, I'm glad you bought the whole pack and not me.
I actually didn't even think of, like, the king portion. I just only thought about the philosopher.
Honestly, though, the philosopher part may be the best part of this movie.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see.
So, History of the World, Part 1. The main titles and our forefathers. Which I do find it rather interesting that this is narrated by Orson Welles.
I love that this is narrated by Orson Welles. He was slotted multiple days to do all of the narration work for this movie. Man got it done in a few hours.
I mean, he only has, like, the most dialogue he has is in these first 2 or 3 opening scenes. Everything after that is just, like, light blurb of what era we're moving on to now.
Yeah, I think very much that they thought there was going to be multiple takes, which is hilarious because this is Orson Welles. Man doesn't need more than one take.
You need a little wiggle room.
A little. Not this point in his career.
Yeah, I mean, this is still back in the day where, like, you don't really... Everything is really well rehearsed. I mean, we got bloopers and stuff from the older movies too.
Oh,
always.
Absolutely.
But, like, everything is planned, and you don't have a lot of, like, work around with that too. Because, like, what was it? I learned recently in The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser one.
Yes.
When he does the eye poke, or The Mummy 2.
Yes.
When he does the eye poke, that wasn't scripted, and they're like, we like this. Can we work around this a little bit?
Yeah, because it means more money. And now we budget it in, I think most of the time it's budgeted into like, oh, well, we're going to have this wiggle room for going back and reworking some stuff. This movie came out in 1981. Wasn't a ton of reworking happening. But still, impressive. Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Bringing us in.
Yeah, and I do like that it is starting to be like a little parody of other films as well, with 2001: A Space Odyssey right away. And
absolutely.
Abridging the evolution into our masturbating forefathers. Can't escape masturbation, Chris.
I appreciate that this movie doesn't lie to you about what type of humor you're getting into. Because it is well known that a lot of the time, a Mel Brooks movie ends up in the R section. And that's because he's not usually shy from the sexy jokes.
He's not really PG ever.
No. And that's okay. This one, from the beginning, does not lie to you. You know what sort of movie. This is going to be a raunchy, silly movie.
Yeah, and it's a funny juxtaposition of the image of masturbating apes next to this epic score in the background.
Yes, most of the music is classical works that are... They're pieces you know. And thus it makes it feel like you know what's going to happen. You have this concept of like, oh, well, I know this song. I know it's usually paired with like the start of a world or the start of a grand journey. And it's this.
Yeah, and initially, that's the other thing too, is how this movie starts off is it works with its pacing where it's very upfront and kind of quick through what's going through, especially getting into the next scene of the Stone Age, where it's this is where we have the heavy. I think that part of the reason it works so well too is because it is so heavily narrated.
Absolutely,
because it makes it feel like this little bit of a documentary style to begin with.
I agree, and I personally really liked the documentary style. I get why it fades off later. We have finally characters who can talk for themselves and semblance of a story. But I kind of like this mock-you documentary, where it's really just making fun of those movies.
Yeah, no, exactly. And even with, like, the funny bits of bringing the torch and, like, where they lost the fire, it makes me think of, there's another movie out there called Quest for Fire featuring Ron Perlman. And then also, like, Caveman with, what's his name? Ringo Starr.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's got this, there are prehistoric movies, but it's hard to, like, really parody them without just making fun of old caveman tropes and whatnot. Because, like, even then, like, forcing the women into marriage and then also forcing the gay men into marriage. Kind of a funny little bit there.
There's a lot of risks that are taken in this movie. And I think part of that is because this is later in Mel Brooks's catalog of directing and writing, that he felt brave enough now to really branch out and do what he originally did, which was stand-up. And kind of test the waters a little bit. And I think that's why this one is maybe the weakest one, is he didn't play it as safe as he does in his other movies.
Okay. Well, maybe it's not that he's playing it safe, because I think that the comedy is just a little bit too self-aware and on the nose. That's why it reminds me of Caveman a little bit, where it's...
Sure.
It's trying a little too hard to be funny. And specifically for me is where it's the creation of music, where it's not particularly funny in my regard, but at the same time, like, there's other parts of this where we have the beginning of art, and at the beginning of art you have the art critic where he's physically pissing on the cave painting. It's like, okay, you're being self-aware there, where history repeats itself, nothing really changes in thousands of years.
Absolutely. And Mel Brooks has never been shy about a more challenging or difficult topic. I mean, Blazing Saddles could not be remade today, and there's a lot of reasons why. Granted, it's still considered some of his best work. I think the risks taken as far as who we're taking jabs at, who we're putting as the funny goat throughout this whole movie, more risky than some of his other works.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, at the beginning of this, there's not really these establishment of characters, and so you don't have your fall guy, you don't have your straight guy. They're all just kind of generic caveman characters.
Absolutely, and honestly, for an intro, it kind of works. It kind of eases you into kind of the humor you're going to be seeing. I appreciate that we get kind of the wide variety of what we're going to see. We're going to see some pea humor. We're going to see some play on word humor. We're going to see some play on different groups and people humor. So it's an interesting start. I like that it quickly rolls into this, like, super early Bible era almost immediately. Like, those two almost feel connected.
Yeah, and when we do get to the Old Testament, instead of, like, making it this giant grand epic like we saw with the Ten Commandments, it's kind of playing up that, okay, we can sum up the story real quick of, like, well, he found the Ten Commandments. But I do like that it's that funny little joke of, there were 15, but he drops one of the tablets.
Absolutely one of the best jokes ever written.
And also, that's the other thing, too, I like that there's many times where he's, like, poking fun at the Jewish people as well.
Yes.
Where he sounds like that very stereotypical older Jewish man.
Because he is.
I know he is. But,
and
like,
some of the time it's not a bit.
I actually, outside of, like, this, I don't think I've heard Mel Brooks talk, so...
I do recommend giving him a listen. He's a very funny guy, both in interview and then also some of his early stand-up work, which... he kind of sort of sometimes brings that back. You can see it in the movies, I think, is where he kind of gets that out again. But I do appreciate that, like, this time especially, he really wrote into what he knew as far as, like, the Jewish humor. You could tell he had a lot of jokes in a back pocket that didn't fit in his other movies because those had a direct plot. They had direct characters. And he manages to work in a Jewish joke in, I think, almost every movie. Yeah. But this one, he has a lot more characters he can just, like, have them be a part of because... most of the history of the world follows the Jewish people around in some way.
Yeah, in some way or another. And that, I'll get into it, but that's one thing that is kind of a stickler with me is, like, it doesn't, I think, heavily stick with that theme too much.
No, you can tell that this movie is a movie of tropes and bits. And I get that some people, that's, like, a thing they're really into. They like that more genuine comedy or live comedy feel. personally, I prefer the ones that have a full running cast and a full running dialogue and story arc. So for me, the bits feel too bitty because the rest of the movie is all segmented out into these little shorts.
Even then, like, because that we've gone through the first 30 minutes, or not even 30, probably 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
In 5 minutes, and then we get to the Roman Empire, which is the longest drug out portion of this entire movie.
It definitely is, and I do wonder a little bit. Granted, I couldn't find in interviews specifically him talking about like where he drew lines for like how long each part was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I do wonder if in the back of his mind he saw different parts and thought to himself, that could be a whole ass movie. Maybe I won't go too far. Like the Old Testament, I do think that a retelling of the Ten Commandments done by Mel Brooks as like the whole thing, like that whole 2.5 hour long movie.
Yeah.
If he reworked that, it'd be hilarious.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, just have a more constant theme throughout the movie instead of one gag after another after another.
Which, granted, that's kind of why this one is an outlier. Most of his other works are, they're gags, but there's a running overarching theme, and usually a parody of something, parody on Robin Hood or Star Wars.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of seriousness in between, or I say quote-unquote seriousness, not true seriousness, Mel Brooks seriousness.
Mel Brooks seriousness, and I think part of that happens to be that I know part of the fun is spot the Mel Brooks, but I think because this is segmented, and he is in 5 roles to fill in the 5 segments, I think it maybe is too much Mel Brooks, because the seriousness comes from the characters who are not Mel Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
That's just kind of how it always happens. Because he's not a serious actor, and he never, writes himself or takes himself that way.
Yeah, well, I think something you said earlier really plays into that. Probably why this doesn't work as well is because you said, oh, this is more stand-up comedy. I think that's the big thing, is that it feels like it's one long stand-up comedy routine without being, a true, a traditional stand-up. So it's
Absolutely.
And maybe that's what it is. It's that little experimentation, because there are parts of this I do find funny, and it's more of the background stuff, like the 5 in X or the V in X or the 5 in dime. Which
very funny.
It's all the funny little things in the background. The annual orgy and buffet sign in the background.
Also very funny, yeah.
And also the marketplace where they're selling Roman columns. I
loved the Roman column bit.
I like this one specifically because it goes turn a hovel into a show place. And it is one thing that is stuck with suburban architecture that pisses me the hell off is you have these giant Roman columns in front, or even just a Roman column in this otherwise
modern home.
Not even modern home, just your generic cut and paste suburbs that has 1 or 2 Roman houses with Roman columns that doesn't do anything.
No, you gotta love a Roman revival sticking around till its dying damn breath. I do think that there are smart and funny and detailed jokes, which are part of the fun of a Mel Brooks production. I just think that this time, partially because the majority of this cast is also stand-up actors, I feel like everyone was given a little bit free reign to do stand-up with their lines. I think Mel Brooks definitely had the most free reign because he wrote it. But it is interesting because one of the main actors didn't even get to be part of it, and he is one of the funniest stand-up comedians, I would argue, of all time. The original role for Josephus was going to go to Richard Pryor, but right before he was, literally 2 weeks right before they started filming, unfortunately he had a terrible incident where he was fully hospitalized for burns, supposedly from pouring rum on himself and lighting it.
The Buddhist protest. Or the monk protest, whatever you call it.
The wife at the time claimed that this was probably a suicide attempt, which does track...
What a fucking way to go, or try to go, Jesus.
Yeah. Granted, he did say that he was suffering from drugs at the time, and so that was part of, why that was the choice, was there was not thought behind it. This was just, the impulse. Mm-hmm. He had a long and troubled life, and unfortunately, this did not kill him. He was just hospitalized.
Obviously. I mean, Jesus. It's... I don't even know how long that's gonna burn, because it's...
It was 3rd-degree burns, but that did prevent him from starring in this film.
Yeah, I know 3rd-degree burn. I know it's gonna give you those kind of burns, but, alcohol usually doesn't burn that long, unless, you're swimming in a pool of it.
It was a lot of alcohol. A lot.
You gotta have a high-proof rum for that, too.
I believe it was a high-proof whiskey, and a lot of it. But that is just what I read from a few tabloids that because I know of Richard Pryor. I've listened to his stand-up work before. I'd seen him in other films. I didn't realize he was meant to be in this one.
Yeah, I've got no clue.
I don't think his humor is going to line up with yours, but I did find it interesting that he was the first pick for Josephus, and it makes sense. His humor and his stand-up line up really nicely with Mel Brooks' stand-up and humor, and I think they probably would have played off of each other well. I'm not saying that the rest of the cast didn't knock it out of the park. They absolutely did. They've all worked with Mel Brooks before, but I do think that maybe that was the balance that was missing, because you can see it, especially starting at the Roman Empire section.
And maybe that's the issue, too, is it's one specific person throughout where we get these, like, little bits here and there, because, I mean, when we do get introduced to comicist, stand-up philosopher...
Yes, hilarious. Love the name.
Unemployment job services, again, reflecting modern times on the past and the bullshit of philosophy. I mean, it parallels how much, or making fun of how history repeats itself.
Absolutely. And I think some of these small skits that are put in there, like the Roman columns or the unemployment office where asking, have you bullshit this week? Did you try to bullshit last week?
Yeah.
Like, those bits are hilarious. It's just they continue to play off of it. Like, the joke runs a little too long, you know?
Yeah, because that's the thing, is like, it's gone past that documentary style and now it's into the actual gags that kind of put it at an odd of, like, the first half of the movie. Because even, like, when we get introduced to Josephus and, like, the lions eating the Christians, and it's got a funny uncircumcised joke, but it has those jokes, and then it goes into, like, I don't get the Ethiopian shim sham dance, like, it just...
Yeah, some of them, I don't know if I'm missing the context, which I could be. Again, this movie's from the 80s, maybe there's something that I'm missing. Or is it a historical joke? Because while Mel Brooks writes sometimes little low-hanging fruit, there is a lot of, like, actual research that goes into most of his movies. Like, factually, he gets a good bit right. Like, I was impressed that he named most of the columns and labeled them correctly.
I mean, that's not too hard to research. But...
It's not, but it would have been an easy thing to overlook.
Yeah.
Like, how hard would it have been to just been like, put some columns over there. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, I get that, having that little bit of accuracy.
Yeah, so, like, am I missing something, or is this just not landing?
Yeah.
Hard to tell.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know, it is hard, because, like, and maybe it's just, I mean, the movie's from the 80s.
Early 80s.
Early 80s. This movie's about 10 years older than me, so I wonder if it's maybe just that line of humor that maybe it's a little bit of absurdity to it that doesn't, like, really hit compared to, like, going back to his other stuff, or maybe we're not involved in the genre as much because this is heavily playing off the old, like, classic Sword and Sandals movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that's the thing, is we already make fun of those genres to begin with. It's not like going back to Blazing Saddles that's a parody on Westerns.
Absolutely.
Or Young Frankenstein, a parody on horror, or even later Spaceballs, all these franchises we grew up on. Maybe it's also because, like, with us, our Sword and Sandals would have been, like, Conan the Barbarian, Hercules, Xena Princess Warrior, so it's a different type of... The genre evolved a bit more past when we got to see his stuff.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that Mel Brooks does, usually subtly, and I'm wondering if this is a less subtle one, is he does play off of previous comedians, either they be like late night shows or the talent show style, or even just normal comedians that would have been popular at the time. I like stand-up comedy. I have not done the years worth of research to go through the whole history of everyone who's ever been referenced. Mm-hmm. So is this a play off of someone specific that I don't know? Also a possibility.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just... There's parts where, like, especially like when they bring in, like, the random damsel and the horse, which I'll get to the horse later.
We will get to the horse.
I low-key appreciate that one just a little bit.
The horse at least plays out well.
Yeah, but when it comes to, like, bringing in Empress Nympho, it just feels like a convenient excuse to get on to the next scene.
It does.
And I think that's my biggest issue, is that these jokes start to become jokes of convenience instead of, like, it's... They don't string together as well as I want them to, compared to, like...
Yeah.
There's not that overarching narrative from, like, the documentary style that keeps it flowing or, like... plays into it a little bit more.
No, absolutely. And don't get me wrong, I think the Roman Empire is an interesting time to have a Mel Brooks setting. It's just that this isn't the whole movie. We still have 2 other parts to get through. We've already done 2 parts.
Mm-hmm.
This is the one that feels the most disjointed. However, it's one of the longest ones.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's just going to be one thing we'll talk about is, like, things just not hitting with us.
Definitely. And I think unlike other Mel Brooks films where the jokes kind of come quick and fast, so you have just enough time to laugh before someone else is delivering a new line and a new joke, and we're on to the next gag. This one spends a little bit of time really laying in the humor of that moment. Not necessarily a bad thing, but it does mean that the awkward jokes take longer.
Mm-hmm.
Again, leading to that stand-up comedy feel as opposed to the more scripted jokes we're used to.
Yeah, and I think especially when we move into Caesar's Palace, like, I like the fun kind of Vegas ripoff. I mean, it's Vegas.
Not even a ripoff. Literally filmed at Caesar's Palace.
But, like, I think that's the thing, is, like, the gags just don't work for me on this one. Like, Emperor Nero just being a slob the entire...
Yeah, and I know that one's based off of some other older movies. Like, I see the reference, I've seen the movies.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that the general audience, even for the 80s potentially, are really going to make that connection other than just fat guy jokes.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't really...
It's not as thought through.
No, it's just one gag that doesn't work well with, like, even bringing the character Marcus Vindictus.
Yes.
And just, like the transition into, like, oh, it's gonna be a game show for a second here, and he bathes in the treasure. Like,
a little odd.
Yeah, it just, I don't know. I mean, it's...
There's a lot of bits, and I think this is where the Roman Empire probably should have ended, and we start a new era. Because then I would have been like, oh, that was a little weird, but on to the next thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I mean, don't get me wrong, there are some fun bits or funny bits here too, where, like, the servant waits while the master baits. Like,
but she is always hilarious. Every time I see her, so funny.
I mean,
yeah, and, like, don't get me wrong, there are more good jokes. Like, we're only halfway through the Roman Empire part. There are more good jokes later. I just wonder if we could have, like, maybe condensed everything a little bit more, or even, like, left it for a different movie or a different, like, play.
Yeah, I think, again, you bring up that it feels like they're all disjointed, like it's just kind of something he had floating and putting together, and that's kind of like where it's going to a different genre, but Paranoia Agent by Satoshi Kon, all that was just fragments of ideas he had that he couldn't work into, like, a full-blown movie, but that one works a little bit better because it's so abstract and bizarre at the same time, whereas this is... It's got the physical gags, but then it's got, like, the one-liners here and there that just don't mesh together well. And
I do wonder if maybe there was some hesitation to make it more disjointed the way that a lot of other anthologies do, where, like, each part doesn't talk to each other, like, there's not this overlap, they're all so separated. And I wonder if there's some hesitancy there, because for the most part, a general audience isn't attracted to those.
Yeah, and maybe partly because why this scene doesn't work as well, even compared to the other ones for me specifically, is because there's 2-3 gags going on at the same time.
True, and I also wonder, like, if our tastes have changed over time. Because I do remember finding the entirety of the Roman Empire much funnier as a, like, high school and college-age kid when I watched this first.
Mm-hmm.
And now, as an adult, I've seen most of the references that are being played off of, I'm getting more of the smaller gags, and I'm not as interested, partially because I've seen what other works he's done.
Well, and maybe that's part of it, too. Maybe it's a little bit meta in the next portion, which is A Performance to Die For, where it's old school humor not being funny for that crowd. Kind of like, okay, times change, but, I know he's also kind of like the old role of jesters, and, like, every comedian's gonna bomb one way or another. Just this is the chance of a lifetime that he's absolutely screwing over.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, even then, like, there was the funny joke of, like, the Jews must be, or the Christians at this point. Yeah, yes. That's right. We're up past the Jews to the Christians, where it's they must be a poor religion because they've only got one God.
That is funny though.
Yeah,
that was funny.
Yeah, again, they've got these little jokes here and there that work. It's just...
Again, it feels very much like trial stand-up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even when they put them to the Battle of the Fools, like the gladiators...
Again, kind of funny.
Kind of funny, but it's also ruined because, like, he dips his thumb in ranch and licks it off for some reason. Or the Caesar does.
Caesar dressing.
I thought it was ranch.
It's probably ranch, because Caesar dressing doesn't look good on camera.
No.
But yeah, no, it is. There's a lot of jokes that I think maybe on paper worked a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone's acting is the problem. I think everyone acted very funny. They sold me the lines very well. I'm just not convinced of how like back to back to back stuff is. There's no really like a running throughness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the other thing too, is like there is production value put into this. The sets are pretty awesome.
The sets are often, again, this is not by any means early in Mel Brooks' career. This is pretty far along in it. He had the money backing it.
Yeah, and maybe part of it too is, again, it's not because it's poorly acted or the casting's not right. I think it is because it's unconnected, because we don't have a care of whether this character lives or not. He's
True.
been on screen maybe 3 minutes, 5, well, I'd say 10 minutes at this point.
Yeah, 10 minutes. Well, the other thing that I wonder if this was meant to be a little bit of a trial movie, because there was never meant to be a second part. I know we have one, but I feel like there's no pressure with not doing a parody. There's nothing to compare it to.
Mm-hmm.
There's no like, oh, well, we have to do the joke because this is Star Wars. We gotta do the Star Wars joke. Versus, this is just history. I'm never making a second one. That's hilarious. I'll just kind of do whatever. Like, we'll just see what sticks to the wall, and then that can be part of my, like, understanding for the next thing I'll do.
Yeah, and maybe you're right there. Maybe it is a little bit more experimental than what we were kind of hoping for compared, like, because that's the thing, is like the two comedians, or I don't even know what the other guy's role is supposed to be, but they have an unreasonable victory, and like they do this whole Scooby-Doo kind of chase scene where the soldiers run into each other, and it's not like
crazy funny, but there are parts where I could see that working in another movie.
Mm-hmm.
So I see the potential. It's just odd that this movie came so late in Mel Brooks's, like, library of stuff that he's done. This feels like something that would have happened much earlier in a career.
I mean, Tarantino talks about it too, where directors get worse as they get older. Like, this feels like something, okay, maybe he's trying to still bring back the old comedies if he did it, like, 10 years after this.
Sure. But also, part of comedy is that you're going to bomb. And you want to bomb, because you need to know what's going to be funny and what's not. If you only produce funny, then you've potentially missed something really good. You have to push the envelope a little bit. And so I do wonder if maybe this was pushing the envelope, because Spaceballs is also risky. I'd argue it's riskier than Young Frankenstein was. And Young Frankenstein had a lot of sexy, risky jokes. But they were pretty well known as like, oh, this will hit, this will be funny.
Yeah, and then you have Blazing Saddles, which... classic.
Peak. So I wonder if a lot of this, because we do see a lot of these jokes repeated throughout his works, there's a lot of similarities, partially because we have the same actor or actress coming back, and they tend to deliver their lines the same.
Yeah.
And so I do wonder if a little bit was experimental for the hell of it. And I'm okay with it if that's the reason.
It just, there's nothing there's not really any behind the scenes on this that we could get our hands on to, like, really explain just a little, maybe even just a little bit of, like, a featurette of, like, oh, he had this idea, and says just like, okay, it's something we did, we moved on.
Yeah, and granted, I did find interviews with both Mel Brooks, specifically about History of the World Part 1, and also with the cast and crew just talking about their time with him, but a lot of it is just time with Mel Brooks, because a lot of these, again, are repeat actors with him, and so it's mostly just, yeah, I loved working with him, it's really funny, he has a lot of good lines, it's a good set, I like it. And then he will occasionally talk, but he's one of those writers and directors who, when he talks in his interviews, is so hard to know how much of it is genuine and how much of it is still a bit, because even though he's a writer, a director, and an actor, he is a comedian first.
Yeah.
And what's the fun in being a comedian if you can't make up a little bit of stuff?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also, like, it's the other side of the humor, too, because let's be honest, this movie is arguably directed more towards a male audience.
There's definitely some parts that I think are definitely, like, the women will enjoy, they will find hilarious, and I do think that is the second half of the Roman Empire part, which, granted, that's a lot of female leads giving the lines. Yeah, that helps.
Because, like, when we get into Among the Virgins,
it's a little silly, but I also feel like the lines are delivered so well.
Yeah, and, like, I get the humor of it, like, it's
and the eunuch part, I think, always tickles my goat. I find that hilarious.
The eunuch part is probably my favorite comic bit of this entire and well, scratch it. It's probably my second favorite.
Sure.
But, like, the parts where, like, they're just watching the dicks bounce, I feel that's a guy writing it of, like, a girl obsessed with.
No,
okay.
I think Granted, I understand that not every woman's taste in sexy jokes is the same, but I think a lot of funny women find that sort of objectification of men hilarious.
Okay, well, yeah, I can see where you're coming through with that. It just, I think...
But it is. It's written from a guy's style.
Mm-hmm.
But the person who delivers it, she always knocks it out of the park. She's known for that kind of humor. She plays that role again and again, so I know who I'm getting it from. I know that it's genuine. She genuinely finds this funny. And she always manages to do a facial expression to go with it to add a little bit. Like, when she watches them bounce away, it ends with her eyes rolling a little bit.
Yeah, like, oh god.
Oh my god,
this.
I can't believe it. I love...
Well, I think maybe for me it's just because it's paired next. The musical moment is what pisses me off. The
musical moment is a bit much, and so Mel Brooks, not every single movie, but a lot of movies, works in a musical bit, and I think part of it is because he's a stand-up comedian at heart, and how much fun is it to try and do your own lyrics to a well-known song?
Is it a well-known song? What song were they doing?
I don't know the name of the song.
Okay.
But Mel Brooks doesn't usually compose his own songs. He usually picks a song from another, usually older genre. You can see that really well in this movie because he uses the same bass song later in the movie that he used from Men in Tights. Mm-hmm. And I think Men in Tights, because it's there's more musical bits to that one that I think we had a little bit more help. But he doesn't normally, lean into the musical part of a movie. He's really good at picking from an existing, usually historic sources and adding to it. And that's been an old comedy bit for a long time, making up your own lyrics to either a popular song or an old song that everyone knows.
Yeah, because it's also not like Young Frankenstein where they have that one little musical moment where it makes sense because they're on stage, whereas this one is just it feels out of nowhere. That's the other thing too. There's a couple parts like this where we have musical moments, and there's only 2 musical moments.
There are only 2 musical moments, and I don't think either of them are needed. I know they are a standard, just like having him appear in his own movie. Mm-hmm. I don't like how they're worked in. I think even Men in Tights' 2 musical numbers are worked in better, just because they are so silly, and they're very pointed towards whatever plot point we're happening at the moment. Or no, there's more than that, because Miriam sings too in that movie. Totally forgot about that. But I normally like the musical little funny bits in this movie, in Mel Brooks movies. This one's not my favorite. It feels a little out of left field, and also the jokes in the song just don't hit as hard, I think. Yeah,
I think that's probably why I don't get, or didn't really enjoy the penis bouncing joke, because I'm sure in some other context I would have liked it.
Sure.
It just caught me off guard, maybe. Because, that's the other thing, too, is, I do like the chastity, where it's just a no entry sign.
That is hilarious.
Instead of it's the low budget version of doing a chastity belt that's been overdone in all these genres. It's just and
it's just a string.
Yeah,
just a string, and someone printed it off on the office printer.
Yeah, and
it's hilarious.
It goes back to it's not that I don't find the penis joke funny. It's when we get to the eunuch test, that's funny too, because it's funny. Okay, yeah, all these guys aren't reacting, but it's he's trying his hardest, and they're oh, he's not gonna make it because he got a pretty girl in front of him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just it's that odd bit here and there that just doesn't work either well, because even when they have to run away, there's some random dude with a jukebox walking by, and it's just
And again, that's where I think normally in a Mel Brooks movie where we have a plot or something we are parodying, a lot of those jokes get absorbed into that sort of, it's a parody of this, or it's a play off of a Western.
Well, maybe it's a play off of Blazing Saddles where they break off the set. This is just some dude who walked through the set that they didn't catch in editing. Maybe that's what it is that we don't, at least I haven't gone through a lot of the epics outside of the 10 Commandments and the couple that we've reviewed. Usually when we go to Sword and Sandal movies, we're going to the garbage ones.
That's true.
That are already jokes in themselves.
Those are my favorite by far. And granted, I've definitely not seen all of the epics. I'm sure he's pulling from a lot of stuff that maybe if you were a big movie nerd in the 80s, you would know. But it is a little sad that, this doesn't stand on its own anymore, because a lot of his other works do, even if you don't know who he's parodying as far as, Frankenstein's dressed up as this on stage. You might not know exactly what's happening, but you get the gist of it.
Well, and that's the thing is, his other movies, at least at the point when I first watched all of them outside of Spaceballs, you don't really need to know the source material that he's referencing, and this one feels like you kind of have to be immersed in that genre.
Unfortunately, I agree with you, and that's too bad, because again, I do know a lot about this genre, but I'm not from the 80s, so I'm working backwards quite a long ways here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, even then, like, all those moments that we like are short-lived, because, like, even when they're escaping Rome, like, the Sundial Watch is funny. I do like
the Sundial
that.
Watch is hilarious.
And, like, the backgrounds are what I find more interesting, too, because they got an RX apothecary. I mean, then they have this long-running joke of, oh, we're gonna need a miracle, and it's the horse that they saved earlier.
Hilarious.
Which, that's the thing, is it plays off all right, but it just doesn't really carry on. I think part of it, too, is like, it's like, going back to us talking about it being a parody, it doesn't feel like a parody. It just feels like a Jewish comedian in Roman times.
Which I guess it is.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, yeah, that's exactly what it is, and I think that is the issue, that it's just...
Well, and that is one of the odd points, is because, again, Mel Brooks is Jewish, he writes about what he knows, and he does work Jewish jokes into, I think, most, if not all, of his works, because why wouldn't you? Why not? I do think this one is... And I get it, because the history follows the Jewish people around, especially from, Bible times forwards. That's just kind of how it works. That's how the history happens to work.
Yeah. I mean, you're basing it around if you're basing it around those religious epics, of course it's going to be following the Jewish people. And even then, you say that, but it only does it for like 45 minutes of the movie, and then we're off to France.
I kind of wish we'd leaned in maybe more to the Jewish history part, because Granted, I don't know a bunch other than outside the Jewish stand-up community that, honestly, most of my research ended in the 90s, because I continued on following different comedians by then. I just wasn't specifically picking Jewish, it's just that was what was pushed, or that's what still stands, I guess. It's what's left over, it's what I can easily get a hold of and find. I kind of wish we'd pushed harder and just really leaned into one aspect to kind of have the running joke of the whole movie. So that way it's like, oh well, we started caveman, made it to religion, and we just leaned in for the whole history here.
But that would have been history of the world.
Kind of, yeah. There's Jewish people everywhere, and I mean, it's the Western world.
Yeah.
So might as well. And I know the movie ends with the French Revolution. It wasn't originally going to, or potentially wasn't going to. There is a cut scene, I found an interview where Mel Brooks talks about how well, yeah, I don't cut a lot of stuff because I write really well, we practice a lot. But there was one thing that he did supposedly, according to his own words, cut. And I wonder if that's the case, maybe there could have been some reworking, maybe we could have picked a different time period to end the movie on. Then we could have had that running joke just kept going.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it just... I don't know. I think it all just feels like a convenience, because even when they're running, or on the run, their smoke screen's a giant joint. It's just
which now, not funny. When I was in high school / early college, hilarious. One of the only parts of the movie I remembered regularly. So I do think that one is just a demographic issue.
Yeah, well,
because I no longer find the giant joint as funny as I did.
Yeah, and I think part of it is just because it is stoner humor out of nowhere. And it's not even stoner humor. It's just, it doesn't have a bite or anything interesting to it, because they just kind of leave them and they're off on their own.
And also there's no history joke to go with it. It's not a well-known fact that marijuana was discovered during the Roman Empire.
Or maybe it's just a play on that people like getting high.
No, it definitely is. It's just a joke to be a joke. But it feels so out of left field for it to be such a big gag that I wonder if there maybe could have been a different period-specific joke to have that be the big ending bit.
Well, and that's the other thing too, is he does try interlacing these history bits together where it doesn't follow the history 100%, where they are freed because Moses is parting the one little river because he's being robbed.
Okay, hilarious. Don't get me wrong. That bit is very funny. But it is very out of left field. And especially because, we already covered the Ten Commandments portion, and I wonder if maybe we're trying to work into, history. This is all story, it's all fake, because we come back to that later. But it doesn't resonate hard enough for later when the same thing happens again, granted a different character, that you're oh, it's we've been doing this whole thing as like a play or a story instead of like a true documentary, which doesn't match the beginning because we played off of it being a real documentary. So like it doesn't match.
Yeah, because like even if they had done that, it would have worked well, especially considering like how heavily edited documentaries can be.
Which, yeah, it could have been very funny. I do kind of wish we had leaned into more of a, jab at documentaries in general. Yeah,
again, just one consistent theme across it instead of jokes of convenience.
Absolutely. I don't even care which one you pick. Pick one of the ones we've talked about. I would have been happy with any of them.
Yeah, because, like, at least, and I know you don't like it, and it's one of the few musicals I do like.
Yes.
Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, it's a musical.
Yeah, I know you don't like it.
I don't like it, which is hilarious because I grew up and I did like it when I was younger. And then I realized that it's bad.
Granted, I also haven't seen it since I was like in maybe high school, probably middle school is the last
My
time I
recommendation is someone who grew up liking it and now doesn't. Don't rewatch it.
No.
It does not hold up.
Yeah, I'll find out for myself.
I know you will.
But, like, that's the thing, too, is, like, we get to this next bit of The Last Supper, and it's just jokes that people are bad at their jobs.
Okay, but the idea of the wait staff at The Last Supper, hilarious on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And don't be wrong, I like Mel Brooks. I like his humor. I think a different actor doing this role would have been better.
Yeah, I mean...
The Last Supper portrait with having them be like, oh, no, it's fine. We hired a portrait artist to come in real quick.
Leonardo's here to paint your portrait. Like...
That's hilarious. I loved it. But again, like, it works because it's a different bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't, you forget that this is all supposed to be Roman Empire stuff because there wasn't Jesus anywhere else in this.
Yeah, it's this blending of time. What it is it makes me think a little bit of when I watched, and I haven't seen the original, but I saw the remake of Ben-Hur because my parents took me to it. I going into Ben-Hur thinking it was just going to be a chariot movie.
Yeah.
And then at the end where Jesus just kind of
randomly starts
showing up.
Yeah, it's a little strange, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes me think a little bit of that. But I honestly don't know how else they would have ended this portion because it's like, okay, that's kind of like when we stereotypically think, and we're not talking about do you think of the Roman Empire all the time? Because, this isn't going to be the end of the Roman Empire.
Of course I think about the Roman Empire all the time. No, I don't. I don't care.
Yeah, when it comes to the general public, this is kind of like the end because, okay, Roman Empire is over. The Christians are taking over, even though it was still a few hundred years before we had Constantinople.
Sure. No, like, I see why, from, like, a writing standpoint, we drew lines where we drew them. I just think that we maybe could have played stuff out a little bit and realized that, like, we didn't need this whole bit. This could have been a completely different movie, or just left out entirely, and we could have ended 10 minutes ago with them escaping.
Yeah, exactly.
We could have been done.
And that's the thing, is like, maybe it's the fact that there are so many endings, like how people it's not that continuous flow, whereas like people complain about, oh, Lord of the Rings had too many endings, but Lord of the Rings endings were continuous and had a flow to them. And
they also wrapped up a bunch of storylines. There is no storylines here.
Yeah, exactly. This dinner is just like, okay, it's one last gag for the Roman Empire that it's not going to go anywhere or be repeated again.
True, and again, don't get me wrong, I do think the jokes here are funny. I just think that we could have maybe had a little quick jab and someone saying a funny line about, like, oh, sure would suck if the Roman Empire fell, and then we move on to the Spanish Inquisition.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the thing, too, is, like, it's kind of following, like, okay, well, in Roman times, the Jewish people were persecuted. During the Spanish Inquisition, they were. Like, It's got a good setup of, like, okay, well, maybe it's the history of the persecution of the Jews.
And there would have been plenty of context to work with. Granted, I know that one of the writing things that Mel Brooks left on the floor, and thus it's in the credits, is, like, Hitler. We see Hitler on ice.
Yeah.
I think hilarious. We could have picked one more because there's plenty to pick from of the Jewish people being persecuted or something about their history instead of French Revolution, because the Spanish Inquisition part kind of feels like it's in line with the rest of the movie in a way that, like, I don't like it. I think it's maybe the weakest part. Yeah. But it does feel like it matches the rest of the flow, where the French Revolution, hilarious, does not feel like it matches the rest of this movie.
Yeah, and maybe that's the other thing, too, is, like, all the other characters aren't, like, funnily named or anything, like you brought up with...
True. I do love a funny name.
The Life of Brian. Biggest Dickus.
Biggest Dickus is maybe the greatest joke ever written.
Yeah, where it's, the judge Torquemada out of anything.
Yeah, that, again, hilarious. I love a silly name. But, yeah, from But French Revolution, there is one funny name. It gets beaten to the earth because it's the only funny name.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot of characters, though, we could have been working with here.
Well, and maybe it's also because this is more in line with your humor of like why you like part of this, even though it's the weakest bit.
Absolutely.
It's because it's the slapstick and cartoonish humor that tied into the first half of the movie that we didn't see through the entire Roman portion.
No, absolutely. And the other thing that I think works better is, don't get me wrong, again, I like Mel Brooks. I do think his acting is good. I think Mel Brooks is strongest when he's doing a cameo in his own movie, as opposed to having big full roles where he's the main star. I think the Spanish Inquisition part is hilarious because he's not really the main character in this part. I still think the role's a bit large for how much I normally enjoy him like just showing up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But this one feels closer to what I'm looking for.
Yeah, well, and maybe part of it too is because where this scene is placed, it's at a point in a movie where it would be like that big midpoint pre-intermission scene that we would see in these much longer epics.
True.
Or in like another more musical number, because we've had this and then we had the last musical number. Maybe if there were more musical bits
Maybe
in
if there was more music. Again, something consistent to pull all 5 of these pieces together, because at this point, by the Spanish Inquisition, the only thing else I've remembered about this movie is the last thing we watched. I've completely forgotten about the first 2 acts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's disappointing, because there was funny parts in them, but they're so separated from these last 3 acts.
Yeah.
That like I've forgotten them entirely.
Yeah. Well, and that maybe if it tied in a little bit more, or like they brought the gag in again, because they do treat this kind of like a game show a little bit too.
I love that they've created roulette out of prisoners on the water wheel. That's funny.
Yeah, and of course you line up the rabbis and it's gonna rain gold.
Yeah, like the jokes practically wrote themselves. I am also impressed that there was at no point the very obvious joke of no one suspects the Spanish Inquisition.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been low-hanging fruit, and Mel Brooks is above that. Just kidding, there's a lot of piss jokes.
Yeah. I don't know. It is a very odd scene that just I get what they're trying to go with it, but again, you go back to the last 45 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
And it doesn't tie in well either, because again it's only got that little bit of narration in between, and then boom, we're into the next segment. And it's even the same thing with going into the French Revolution. We get a little bit of Orson Welles, and then it's right into the French Revolution.
And honestly, I feel like both the Roman Empire part and the French Revolution part should have probably been pulled from this entirely and been their own movies. Partially because, A, they are the largest chunks. They take up the most time. They also feel the most disjointed as far as, like, what we're talking about as far as this quick overview of history, which was kind of the idea that we kind of get the gist of. The French Revolution part definitely has some of the better jokes. Again, though, it suffers from the unfortunate instance of Mel Brooks being the main star for the majority of it.
Yeah. Well,
not saying that he's a bad actor. It's just he's funnier when he's briefly there and then leaves again. Like that one quick line, he comes back, then maybe comes back again. Like he could have been a recurring character instead of like, oh, there's Mel Brooks as the king and then also as Piss Boy. It's
because those movies have actual plot in between, whereas this is vignettes of nothingness, really.
It is. I also think that this one is the weakest in the humor. It has some very funny parts.
Spanish Inquisition or French?
The French Revolution.
Well,
and
okay.
I say that because I think the rest of it has a little bit of something for everyone.
And I break up the French Revolution into 2 bits. The very first part where it's showing where everyone's so poor.
Yes.
Like, it goes back to, like, I like how they reintroduced this one, setting up history repeating itself. We got the markets of Rome, but instead of the decadence of new modern plumbing, columns that will turn your house into a palace, we have a market of apple cores, dead rats, and nothing.
The nothing one gets me every time. That is hilarious.
Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, of course, I'm gonna like this bit. I mean, it's making the French dirty and ugly, and
they don't even have a language. They just speak in this ridiculous accent.
Exactly.
No, there is some really good, solid jokes, but again, most of them are happening when we're not focused on the quote unquote main character, who's not the main character because we haven't followed this character other than this like 15-20 minute bit.
Not even then. The French Revolution, like the very first part, that character, we only see her for a little bit and then it's over.
Yeah, which is disappointing because she was funny.
Yeah, I mean, ending the meeting on a high note.
Hilarious. I will be doing this the rest of my very professional corporate job for the rest of time.
Liar.
I won't. I can't do it.
But it's a low-rung humor that I think that would have worked better throughout the movie instead of...
I agree. And it's a humor that a lot of people can like, and then there's a different joke for everyone. Whereas once we get to the king portion, especially the, like, luxury before the potential risk of invasion happening, the jokes really are only for a very small audience.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing, too, is, like, there's inklings of potential themes, like with
For sure.
Count de Money.
Count de Money, name hilarious.
Which I do like this scene, too, because it's a repeat of the Roman senators, where we have that one bit of, like, what do we say? Fuck the poor. Yeah. Like, it's that same kind of, like, mentality.
It's got the same energy.
And also, like, just making fun of the absurd French standards, and it did make me think of, the raisins are mine, brother.
A little funny, yes.
I bought the raisins with my money. Please give me the raisins, even though I've eaten my own.
Yes.
Yeah,
no, and like, those two characters are very funny. Count de Money is funny. His little lackey is funny. But we then shift our focus to the king, which I get it. He's the king. This is the French Revolution. We do kind of have to focus on the easy target, right? Which would have been the king causing the problems.
Well, and that's the other thing, too, is, like, not just that, but make fun, like, we've talked about it, maybe do a history of the Jewish people, but maybe do a movie about the history of the downtrodden, like how history repeats itself of these people rise to power over walking over the little people.
And I think this French Revolution scene, especially once we get to the palace, I know that especially Mel Brooks does a good job of very comedically and lightly managing to bring in a lot of big and heavy topics into his humor, so that way you get to have that discussion and that uncomfortableness if that joke doesn't land with you. He's very good at it. This one, he crams the most of that in. We get the walking directly on top of people on the red carpet. We get the little people debate on whether or not that is right, the history of it, the humor, there's a lot there. We get the bad gay jokes sprinkled throughout because French.
Poking fun at the penis size of the French. I mean, hell, we have a lot of piss jokes in this. Of like,
there's so many piss jokes.
Piss boy, garçon de piss, oui oui.
Which is making fun of the history of the rich people and whether or not they were actually as clean as they, it's easy to be like, oh, they were dirty, disgusting people, how could they be doing
even
this?
Pissing on each other and then, like, wait for the shake.
Absolutely. And some of them are in the line of normal Mel Brooks jokes where there's an overarching funny, wait for the shake, great, hilarious. You don't need to then sit back and think about the history of the actual reasons behind we think rich people of a certain time period were dirty or had bad hygiene or were just peeing in the corners of the palace. May or may not be true. Do research. Right? Like, the do research part is usually not needed to enjoy it. Unfortunately, some of the humor in this part, we're now more sensitive to than I think the 80s were. No, I know that the 80s was. And so now, because a lot of us already have the research in the back of our heads, large chunks of these gags no longer work. Because there's not just like a, haha, I don't care about doing the research, even though, like, the point of comedy is to bring up these topics. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's I think part of what it is it's a little heavy-handed, like, especially with, like...
a lot heavy-handed.
The French decadence, the peasant shots.
The use of different people as lesser than, and those, like, stunts as props.
Yeah.
And granted, like, we know that now. That's part of most people's lexicon. A lot of us are more educated than we were in the 80s about that topic. And so those jokes aren't funny anymore. Because we know all the background to it, as opposed to it being an entry point to that topic.
Yeah, even, like, the little bit of... And I do find this one kind of funny, if it had been, like, done in a different manner of, like, oh, it's a temporary revolution. Like, it's a solid... That could have been funny. It wasn't quite delivered right. But it's done in a way where it's a good way to bring back the piss boy from earlier and play on the joke that, oh, we're using the same actors. Of course he looks like he's going to be a good body double because he's the same guy. That is funny. That is funny. But again, there is the potential for longer, better running gags, but we don't have time for them, or did not choose to go with it. So, like, if the whole movie had been nothing but the French Revolution, which, honestly, I think probably would have been a killer movie, it probably would have been funnier to have, like, Princess and the
Popper sort of style thing where it's the same actor, it's Mel Brooks. They eventually swap places and the wrong one dies.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, too, is, like, they do try and set that up, but again, it's...
But we have such a short time span here, because we're doing other shit the rest of this movie.
Because we don't care about Piss Boy. He's been in 2 jokes, and the only person we even maybe remotely care about is the king, where it's like, it's good to be the king, which I was waiting for it to get into, like, a musical moment, because it kind of sets it up of, like...
Yeah, and honestly, the character that I regularly was like, oh, that character could have been the actual main character of this part, is Count de Monet. Because that is a funny joke, it runs well, but, again, we run into the issue of, unfortunately, Mel Brooks should not be the main star of his own movies. It's just not as funny.
Yeah, and I think that is the part that he's getting into, is like, oh, we're re-harping this over and over and over again.
And again, like, that's where I think most Mel Brooks films, he's one character, maybe 2 or 3, depending on which movie you're looking at and how many characters, how much makeup we're putting on. He wanted to be in every scene. I see why. The running gag is spot Mel Brooks. Sure. I don't want him to be the main character, though. If him and DeMonet had switched spots, that probably would have been better for me.
Yeah, well, and even then, like, when we do have the body swap and the girl that he's coerced into giving herself to him, there are bits where the guy's not expecting it, which shows that the royalty doesn't care. They haven't been thinking about this, just, oh, she's pretty, I want to sleep with her. But then he's like, oh, let's look at a couple nude paintings together. There's this little...
there's good humor there. But again, we either don't have time to fill out this, or we leave this actual funny bit, because it moves so nicely until, oh, well, there's got to be a pardon in the king's desk, and the king's desk is full of executions, and one pardon.
Yeah, well...
Like, that's a funny bit. Keep that type going.
But we don't have time to, like, care about these characters, because it's like, okay, well, now her father's crazy, and we just release him as... the revolution begins, because we have to wrap this movie up.
We do have to wrap this movie up, because they were aiming for that hour and 30 sweet spot that the 80s craved.
Yeah, even poking fun at them being on set of, like, who designs this stuff?
That is a little funny.
Yeah, like, there are bits, but it's just, like, it just is one gag after another that just doesn't tie in super well, because even, like, the big ending, like...
The big ending was a little strange, because you knew it was coming. Even if you haven't seen the movie.
I didn't know it was coming.
You didn't know it was coming?
No.
Oh, you were one of the few who got. And I think that only because Mel Brooks style movies, you kind of know where the punchline is going for a lot of them.
Yeah. Well, and I think I do like part of this ending, though, because I like, especially where you get to the history of, like, where the guy died, and they couldn't continue it.
That's funny.
That makes sense with this of, like, oh, it's going to end with the French Revolution, but then Miracle is back to save them.
Absolutely.
In a long gag that I don't think really plays off, but I
don't either, because, again, you lose the idea of it being throughout the whole movie.
But I think it works just a little bit.
I think if Moses had saved him, that would have been funnier.
I don't. Here's the thing: is like I don't think Moses would have worked as well because
then you can't ride off into the sunset.
Because Miracle plays off that whole traditional Greek play of the Deus Ex Machina.
True.
This thing that comes down that just wraps up and saves the day.
Yeah, it just ends the story in an impossible way.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. That's why they named it Miracle.
Yeah, and like I don't get me wrong, the big end. I get it. It's a real elbow slapper for me.
It sure is. It was not actually the last act originally. According to Mel Brooks, the actual last act was supposed to be 3 Miles Island, which, if you have forgotten your history, is the 3-mile long stretch of islands that we use to test nuclear bombs. Did we remove all of the people from the dangerous area before we did that? Absolutely not.
That would have been a dumb way to end it.
So, according to Mel Brooks, there was supposed to be a scene where he has a half dog, half man for a father, and a half cat, half woman for a mother, and it's play off the radiation and the 3-mile long island and the horrible actual radiation sickness and cancer that we caused because we could not be bothered to protect some people.
Yeah,
And according to Mel Brooks, the audience did not find this funny, so he left it out.
Yeah, I don't blame him.
I don't either. Like, that's not... we could do better.
It sounds really stupid because, like, I do like that he sets up this potential sequel of coming soon in the end credits with Hitler on Ice.
The Hitler on Ice is hilarious. I love that.
A Viking funeral with real horns.
That is also hilarious because Especially, again, if you know actual history, which I know Mel Brooks does, no Vikings had horns in their helmet. This is an opera funny, where they put them on there because they had leftover, like, set props, and it made it easier for the audience to know who was who.
Yeah. Or like the last bit of it, Jews in space.
And again, I think this movie would have been funnier if we had removed all of the not Jew parts and just done the Jewish history. Because Mel Brooks does really good jokes, even if you are not a Jewish person, even if you barely know anything. You can enjoy the Jewish comedy. I think this movie would have been better without the non-Jewish bits.
Yeah, I mean, hell, Hitler on Ice, do the Holocaust on Ice. That would be very disrespectful.
That would have been very disrespectful. I love that we ended on the taste of the idea.
Yes.
And I think the reworking, the better version of part 1 would have been still that little clip at the end.
It makes me think of that movie, The Producers.
No, okay, it 100% does. And I think it's because a lot of Mel Brooks' humor, and the humor from the movie Producers specifically, does line up well. And I think where The Producers manages to get away with some of those really challenging jokes that I think specifically History of the World doesn't, is because there is a continuity between characters, between timelines with the story, because it's not an anthology, it's all one big movie, that makes it have this trust in the characters that you know that they have certain motives, they have certain intentions, whereas this one, I don't know these characters. I don't know these people.
Well, I'd say that looking at IMDb...
No, he's one of the writers.
Yeah, Mel Brooks did the screenplay as well as the stage playbook.
Absolutely he did. But, again, one of the reasons why it's not considered a quote-unquote Mel Brooks production is because he gets known for write, produce, and act and direct in his own thing. And so that's why for a lot of these other ones that people might like but not realize Mel Brooks is in, or acts in, or does a voice for, or did a quick write for, or did some TV work for, it's because when it's just him, when it's so concentrated on Mel Brooks, it either is really funny, some of the greatest comedy ever written, or it's just okay.
Yeah, I
there's
can
not,
see
there's
that.
not that other mind, there's not that other hand to kind of balance out the Mel Brooks.
It's kind of like what Nicolas Cage is allowed to do whatever without being reeled back a little bit.
It's 100% like when it's too much Cage versus Cage just briefly there.
Exactly.
And that's just say with everything. I think that's the case for most directors, almost all writers, and definitely most actors. If it's just the one person the whole time, it feels odd. You feel like you're missing that extra, bit.
Yeah, and it's not like Stanley Kubrick being an auteur and, being just the controlling person of every aspect of his movie. It doesn't have that level, I guess, quote-unquote artistry
Absolutely.
that we associate with something like that.
Well, and the other thing to remember is, even though Mel Brooks started with stand-up, the best humor is humor that is played off of other people. That's why we include laugh tracks. Not just so you know when to laugh, but because it feels like a community laugh.
I fucking hate laugh tracks. It is my least favorite thing about, sitcoms, is just that whole bit of, this is the part where you should be laughing. Laugh along with this fake audience that totally was filmed in front of them. No,
I totally understand the upsetness, but just from a scientific standpoint, we know that things are funnier when other people are laughing. That's why stand-up live, when you're with a crowd and everyone else is laughing, is funnier than when you're at your own house with a bowl of popcorn by yourself.
It's why I don't try and watch comedies by myself unless it's a dark humor, because I want that group experience. I want to watch something fun and dumb with people instead of yeah, I get that. That's fine. We watched Happy Gilmore 2 yesterday, and we loved it because it was that dumb funniness that we could all laugh together of oh, remember this bit from the last movie? And that's why all of these actors and big names come back and rework with Mel Brooks. It's because they talk regularly about how they enjoy having this community, that there's this back and forth, that there's this bouncing between each other and the styles of humor, that they play well together. I think this is one of the few, and honestly the worst version, where it's too much Mel Brooks and not enough other happening. Yeah, it's a lot of... I think the biggest issue is when we've talked about this, it goes back to the South Park writing of... True. If you're saying, and then this happens, and then this happens, you have a boring movie, and that's exactly what happens with most of this movie outside a couple bits in the Roman Empire. It's
That's
just,
true.
okay,
That's true.
well, now this gag, now this gag, now this gag, now this gag. And like
Yeah.
that, I think that's the issue, is that it just doesn't really play through with, one, the documentary style it starts off with.
Could have been heavy-handeder.
Or do actual, like, smaller gags throughout history instead of...
yeah.
And I don't know if the history book that he was basing it off of covers a good chunk of these events or whatnot.
And granted, I know that that's the quote-unquote formal statement he's made, saying that, like, this is where it's all coming from. I've listened to a lot of Mel Brooks interviews over the years. I've listened to him talk about his works and his writing style, and he's a very funny guy, and I'm sure there's a grain of truth in everything he says. But, like, with most stand-up comedians, I don't believe him a lot of the time.
No.
It's a great story, and I love that he did find a real depiction that happens to coincide with why there's only the part one. That's hilarious. A great happenstance. I think it's a little closer to the goofy story that he likes to tell, where this was an idea he had. And I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I rewatched this movie all the damn time.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of my favorite movies. Granted, I like Mel Brooks. This is the weakest one, but I like Mel Brooks. I'm always gonna laugh. I'm always gonna have a good time. But if I'm looking at this one critically, this is not where I would start someone on their Mel Brooks journey.
No, not at all. I think maybe that's part of the issue, is that when we talk about Mel Brooks, when most people I've heard talk about this movie talk about it favorably. And I think maybe that's the issue, is that it was overhyped for what it is.
If you missed it at some point in your life, if you for some reason didn't see this and you have friends who are like, my god, this movie's so funny, you are going to be disappointed. If you are watching all of Mel Brooks' stuff because you're a fan and you like all these actors and actresses, you like their stand-up work, you've seen them in other films, you won't be disappointed. You're going to have a good time because you're not setting that expectation.
Yeah. So then, Chris, what do you rate History of the World Part 1?
This is a good bad for me. I still give it a good, because even though we ranted and we raved and we've talked about how it could be improved, part of the reason I did that is because I've seen this movie so many goddamn times. I have lots of ideas because I've seen this movie from end to end countless ways, and I have so many ideas because it's inspiring.
Yeah, I am on the side where, for me, it's just bad.
Sure.
I think the biggest issue for me is that it is not all that funny for me or cohesive. Maybe if I watch this with, like, my dad or someone who might like this movie, sure. I just think it's a jumbled mess of joke to joke to joke compared to, like, other Mel Brooks movies. And that's the thing, is maybe I want it to be those other Mel Brooks movies.
Yes.
And it's not.
No, I completely agree. Part of the reason I'm willing to give it that good is I've already seen all the Mel Brooks movies. Not all of them, don't take me too literally, but I've seen all the big ones. I've seen all the ones that he has written, produced, and acted in. And I know this one's not the best one. But I'm not watching this with rose-tinted glasses. I'm not watching it because it's the funniest one. I'm watching it because I love Mel Brooks' humor. I find him genuinely funny, but it's still a bad movie.
Yeah. So then, would you recommend watching History of the World Part 1?
I know you just listened to me bitch about this movie for a really long time. I still think you should watch it. It's still a fun time. But do not put it on the pedestal that a lot of people who watched it and haven't seen it in a long time are going to put it on there. If you give this movie high expectations, you're not going to enjoy it nearly as much as if you watch this thinking it's a stupid, funny time.
Yeah, I can see where you're going through with that, and granted, I say always explore, even regardless of what people say.
Sure.
I don't 100% recommend this. And maybe it's just because I don't find it funny is why I can't recommend it.
Totally reasonable reason.
I think, how do I put this? I think it's a movie to give at least a watch, but if you are going to watch it with a group of people. Don't just watch it on your own, I'd say.
And I would argue that, truthfully, if you're being really serious with yourself, Mel Brooks movies in general, that's the way to do it. Watch it with a friend. Watch this while smoking the biggest jointus ever created. Watch this with a group. Don't take it too seriously. Maybe even get up and have a snack break halfway through and don't pause it. Like, that's the kind of movie this is meant to be. I totally see it. This is not one of his serious films by any stretch of the imagination. I know he doesn't do very many of those. But this is a fun time. Granted, with that said, if you are like, oh my gosh, I've never gotten into Mel Brooks, you guys talk, so many people love Mel Brooks, where do I start? Not here. Find a friend who has all of them, have them walk you through it.
Yeah. But I do definitely want to go down more Mel Brooks down the line. I mean,
he is arguably my favorite director, so...
I don't want this to be a turnoff to someone who hasn't seen anything else Mel Brooks has done, because I genuinely love the other 3 movies of his I've seen, and The Producers, which I would say is a Mel Brooks movie.
It has the soul.
Yeah.
It has the jokes, it has the humor, for sure.
There is definitely out there, but History of the World Part 1 just isn't for me.
No. Now, you're probably thinking to yourself, should I watch the Hulu special, History of the World Part 2? I wouldn't. I say that as someone who's a really big Mel Brooks fan. I loved this movie. I've seen this movie more times than I have fingers and toes. If you really have nothing better to do with your weekend, sure. But it is not the revamped humor and hype that we, especially now, because the sequel came out quite a while ago.
And we're getting a Spaceballs 2, apparently.
Which I have questions about, because part of the reason Spaceballs 1 was hilarious was because John Candy was in it.
Well, I also think this one is living up to see you in Spaceballs 2, The Search for More Money.
Which is hilarious, and also they have a shit ton to work with because they won't stop making Star Wars stuff. So we have a lot of Star Wars nonsense to pull from, and as someone who is not the biggest Star Wars fan, I am here to see where they take that. I'm ready for a Star Wars joke. My favorite Star Wars character is Jar Jar Binks, and I say that loud and proud. I think he's hilarious, because I don't take Star Wars seriously. And so with that said, I'm excited for something silly. History of the World Part 2 was not taken as seriously as I think some people wanted it to. And also with that said, a lot of people have expected great things from Hulu and Netflix remakes and reboots with TV shows. This is not that. This is from 2023. It's just okay. It's funny. It's not groundbreaking. Watch the movies. Completely finish off the lexicon of Mel Brooks stuff and then get around to that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I'll get around to it myself.
Especially you. I don't think you need to bother.
Yeah, but fortunately or unfortunately, we are done with History of the World Part 1, but the future will tell if our exploration into semi-adjacent history parody will be anything good before we go to hell.
To hell.
Yes. So, but this has been the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast.
Thanks for listening.
Peace. Thank you for stopping by this here town of the good, the bad, and the weird. We appreciate your listenership, and if you want more of our takes in your life, feel free to check us out on social media at the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast, or TGTBTW for short. As well, if we missed a fact, your favorite part of a movie, or just have a suggestion and want to reach out and say howdy, feel free to email us at tgtbtwpodcast@gmail.com. And feel free to join our Discord at the Good, the Bad, and the Weird podcast, where we talk about movies, just share random banter here and there. And always check out our podcasters, streamers, or any other content creator we shout out in our episodes. We really appreciate it. And as always, thank you for listening. Peace.